Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Yasmina Greco. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's webcast. We would like to begin today's program by saying a big thank you to Stack Overflow for sponsoring today's event and let you all know Stack Overflow is the world's largest website for professional programmers. Stack Overflow is a Q&A site that serves as programmers' go-to resource when they need to troubleshoot a coding issue. With more than 25 million developers visiting the site on a monthly basis, Stack Overflow represents the largest community of programmers on the Internet. Thank you again, Stack Overflow. Folks, as we get the event started, I would like to introduce you to Will Cole and Joe Humphreys, and they're going to talk to you about Stack Overflow's Crash Course to Hiring Developers. Will is a product manager for Careers 2.0, the hiring platform that connects employers to developers on Stack Overflow. Will spends much of his time working with the developers on Stack Overflow to understand how they participate in the recruiting process and build products that allow employers to reach developers in the most respectful and efficient way. Joe is a seasoned recruiter who currently recruits for Stack Exchange, a professional network of more than 100 Q&A sites. The most popular of these sites, Stack Overflow, is a website for software developers that is consistently one of the top 100 traffic sites on the Internet. We're really excited to have Will and Joe with us today, folks, to present this webcast for you all. As we begin, I'd like to go over a little housekeeping to help you get the most out of today's webcast. First, you'll want to open your group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we will interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for Will and Joe. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for Will and Joe, please preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that it's for them and we can make sure we see it for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you'd like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you might need to give it permission to access your account. The Twitter widget will automatically append the event's hashtag to your tweet so you don't have to. And today, folks, we have two hashtags. First one, Stack Overflow. Second one, OzCon, all one word. If you have any trouble with the webcast, please take a look at your help widget. If you continue to have trouble, just post it in the group chat and one of our staff will help you right away. If you have choppy audio or stalled visuals, please try refreshing your window. And remember, the best thing you can do for a good audio stream is to close out any apps that could interfere. People always ask, so we'd like you to know we are recording today's webcast and we will have the archive ready usually within 48 hours. And folks, at this time, it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Will and Joe. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello there.
Hi. Thanks, Yasmina. So, everyone, thanks for joining. I'm Will Cole. I'm the product manager for the Careers 2.0 site that helps people hire developers on Stack Overflow. So in part of my role, I'm hiring developers myself to fill out our team, but the other side of it is obviously building a product specifically for this purpose and helping other people understand how to do it better. One of the things that we're really focused on here is making sure that not only are we're selling our product to employers, but we have to be the experts in knowing exactly what developers want and how to best help employers give them what they want to be effective in their recruiting efforts. So that's really the topic of my discussion here, what developers want and how to reach them. And I mentioned here developers and not ninjas and rock stars and wizards. They hate that. Don't put it in your job listing titles. It's not going to go well. So the first thing that when I first started that us and the marketing team did was we asked our users. We have all of the world's developers, or 95% of the world's developers on Stack Overflow, and we did a survey with them. We got tens of thousands of responses, and we asked them, what is most important when you're evaluating a new job? So the answers that we got back were kind of surprising in a way. The first one we got was room for growth. Obviously, this is probably extends past just developers, but developers wanted to know that they would have opportunities for advancement in their career. The next thing they wanted to know was that they were going to work with smart coworkers. This again can be typical of other positions, but it especially showed up on the developers that we asked, and I'll get to why later. The third thing was that the company had good management. The fourth, independence in their role. And the fifth, excited about the products that they'd be working on. Now, some of this seems kind of like standard, but you really need to ask yourself, if this is what developers are looking for, how are you reaching out to them? How are you answering these questions, or how are you answering the question of what they want most? Are you answering it with these things that they're looking for, or are you asking them, to basically look at a list of demands, which is a job listing, and to build those and to see if they, sort of meet those demands? A few things kind of stick out here. The smart coworkers one stuck out to us, as did the independence and the product side of it. And independence kind of stuck out because of what we know developers are like. This is definitely a stereotype and not sort of representative of all developers by any means, but typically, the stereotype is that developers are more introverts than, say, your sales team, who might be very extroverted, right? And the goal of having independence in their role was really indicative of sort of the introvert type of personality that wants to sort of shut out other people and just get things done. So we checked this survey, and we kind of decided, what was missing here. And one of the things that obviously stands out from the list of things that they wanted was money. They didn't ever really mention money. And we definitely have employers coming to us saying that, they have so much more money to pay developers and other people. Why aren't they getting them? Well, we know that money matters to some extent, but one of the things that we also know is that in the United States, the developer's national average salary, excuse me, is just under $93,000, which is pretty crazy. I mean, they're being well compensated no matter what. And the benefits packages that a lot of tech companies are throwing at developers, there's a lot of money value in those perks. Even with all of this, maybe to some extent they expect the money is going to be there, but to most developers, other things just simply mattered more. So one of the things that we decided to do here to sort of test, whether or not this was actually true, this is how someone answered a survey, but was the survey right? So I took it upon myself to actually test this thesis out. And we built some of the tools for Stack Overflow. And don't worry, this isn't going to be a product pitch, but this is just helping us understand, if what they said they wanted was actually true. So we created a couple different ad units that run on Stack Overflow, which is how we help employers hire developers. And one of them kind of stood out. So you'll see three here. One of them focuses on jobs and the job listings that are open in a company. The next one is focused on the benefits that company is offering. And the last one is focused on the team that works at the company and the people that the developer could expect to be working with. So these were pretty interesting. They were new. There were new ways for us to advertise on the site. And we got some results back. So what we saw was, first of all, that our old ads, and we still run some of these, are the job listings that you see on the right here. The ad that we ran that showed the people that you might be working with was 10 times better. Now, I know some of you are looking at this and saying it's just more attractive, and it's a better looking ad, it's going to do better anyway, but it's an enormous result. Also, in comparing the who works with you ad, all the different team members, compared to even the other ones like the benefit and the job listings, the who you're going to work with ad performed better than both of those as well, which stands to reason that when they answered our survey, that was one of the top 5 things that they cared about, and the others were not. So it was really interesting just to see that some of the survey results actually panned out in terms of actually being actionable in your recruiting process. If you were using a different way to reach out to someone, you were getting better results, and especially if you were using one of the ways that developers were pretty much asking you to reach out to them. So the next one here, sorry, just getting this up. Okay. The next one here is, so what's the difference between your job listings that you're currently using to reach out to developers and your company, and what I'm talking about in terms of like, really selling the people that you work with and those other things that the developers want to see. So what we see is that listings are great and they're necessary, right? They're going to tell the developer exactly what needs to be done in their current in the role that you're hiring for. But culture is really what you're selling them, right? The listing's the end result. So if you think of your listing as the first thing you're reaching out to someone with and sort of the first point of contact, it's probably the wrong place to start that contact, right? Because what the developers want to see and what they've told us they want to see is not something that most traditional job listings are going to capture. Especially, things like, the current team that they're going, or the team that you currently have that they're going to be working with, those types of things. It's just not something you can get across in a job listing very well. You're going to have to go through other means in order to reach out to them the way they want to be reached out to. So aside from our product and like kind of how we figured out some of these things, I want to walk through sort of the personality of developers and what we've learned both through building this product and through trying to hire people that and sorry, the thing went down. And sort of the personality of developers and what they're looking from you in terms of what they want to see when you're trying to hire them. So the first thing is accomplishments. Developers respect results. They respect being correct, and they admire accomplishments, right? So this can be many different things, and some things that you might want to focus on and find which one sort of fits, your company or your team's, mold the best that you can kind of show off to a programmer that you're trying to hire. So individual or team accomplishments are the first things, obviously. So if you happen to have someone that has a very public profile, perhaps they're public in the open source space, maybe they're public on Stack Overflow. Even we have developers that have become kind of internet famous, right, for their personalities there. Or if they've launched some particular software that is widely used by a huge number of people, so ship software that that lots of people are using. Obviously, these are the things to point to first if you have that on your team. Sometimes that might not be possible because you're a startup, right? So if the founding members have past successes that they're trying to build upon here, obviously that's something that you're going to want to focus on. One thing that I'm seeing a lot of is that people are trying to sell the vision to developers about what they're going to be doing. You have to understand, like, a developer is being hit up on Stack Overflow, on LinkedIn, on a lot of different places. They've seen these pitches of vision 100 times, right? And even especially on places like LinkedIn and places like that, where they're getting lots and lots of messages, a lot of them feel kind of spammy to them. And the reason it feels like spam is that people aren't pointing to direct accomplishments that they've achieved. They're saying, if only we had you, we could do this other stuff. But developers want to know that you've actually done something before. Someone in your company has accomplished something that because they want to work with those people. So really the end result is that you want to show developers there that you and your team, that you're builders, that you guys are actually accomplishing things, that you're actually shipping software, and that you have the environment to do that. And that there are going to be challenges for them when they actually get there. And the environment's actually probably the most important part. So when you're pitching these things about what you've actually accomplished and stuff like that, that's great and it's necessary, right? But a developer's also going to wonder, what is the environment that I'm going to work in like? So the first thing, and this is probably not clear from the way you're listening to me right now because I'm on a busy sales floor, but developers know that they need peace and quiet to get real work done. So there are lots of ways to achieve that, but you're going to have to show them that that's an issue that they care about. So For instance, like one of the things that we do is we make sure that every developer has a room that they can go to and work in with the door that closes, where they can shut everyone out. I know that that's kind of a luxury, and that's not practical for all companies that might have open floor plans and stuff like that. But you still want to make sure that even in those types of places that you can convey to them that they're going to have a place, even in an open floor plan away from the people talking loudly, that they can actually get things done. They don't want to be inundated with meetings. I don't know anyone that wants to be inundated with meetings, but especially with developers, they kind of have the upper hand here. They're in demand. They get to tell us what they want to see. We know that developers, the reason you're hiring them is because you want them writing great code and shipping great products. If they're inundated with meetings, or if you have a culture at your company where you have a lot of meetings, they're not going to be very happy. And it's one thing to attract developers to your company. It's another thing keeping them there. That is one thing you can do to keep them there. But it is very important in the sense that they know that they're entering into an environment where they're going to be able to focus on the thing that you hired them to do, which was write great code and ship great products. So this one was actually really important to me as a product manager, but they respect management that's flexible around process. Not everyone works exactly the same way. And when I say this, what I'm basically trying to get at is that a lot of times management, product managers and executive management can jump onto fads, whether it's, not necessarily a fad, but a defined methodology that's inflexible. So if you say we're agile, right? And when you say you're agile, you mean we do stand-up meetings every day exactly the same way. There's no variation. You have to be there. Everything's mandatory, zero tolerance type thing, right? Now, some people are going to like the agile process. They're going to like some things about it, but what we see a lot of are people that take it kind of to the extreme, where you can't deviate from a certain process, and it's going to end up frustrating some people. And one of the things I found that works a lot here, and one of the things that helps us attract people, and that we've seen other people attract people with, is not being dogmatic about these processes. Saying how you prefer to run something, to run the management process for developers, saying the culture that you guys have, but not being inflexible in how you apply that process, because it's going to be very difficult to build a large team or even a small team around developers who think exactly the same way about this. They have their own processes, they have their own ways of working, and they want to make sure that the management is going to work with them on that. And they want to work in an environment where they'll see that they'll make an impact. So what I mean by this is basically, we'll get to some other parts in a minute here, but they want to not just feel like they're going to be learning from other people, but they want to know that other people are going to be learning from them. So as much as you're saying, we have a great team, you're pitching your team, it's about marketing your team, they also want to know that they're bringing something to the table, and they want to see an environment where they are not going to be the lowest person on the totem pole or something like that. So the next thing about developers are the challenges. So most good developers, they're not looking to coast. Even if they're working a 9-to-5 job, they're going to want to be challenged. And one of the ways, when you're reaching out to them and you're recruiting them is expressing that, you guys have very clear near-term goals. This isn't always easy. I know that a lot of people working on software projects feel like there's so much to do, and there's not enough people to do it, and they can get really caught up in the long term and like where they're trying to get. But that's not how a developer always works, right? Developers working in steps because they can't get to the long term without doing the very short term, And as a manager or someone hiring a developer, developers can also can very easily be chased off by management that only has this long-term vision and isn't selling a good vision for the near-term goals. There's no way to get to that point without dealing with them. And to that extent, when they're being explained to what the near-term goals for the company are, in addition to where they want to end up, they want to know that they're going to be a problem solver and not just a coder. I think that a lot of people and this is a lot of companies that might be hiring developers who are not necessarily technology companies at their core. They feel like they're going to be passing off business requirements or specs to developers, and they expect those business specs and requirements to be basically followed to a T, and the person's just supposed to turn those into code, and that's all that the developer's for. That's not going to be very attractive. I don't think anyone would find that very attractive when they're looking for a new job, that they're just going to be told what to do. But I think that developers often feel that that's what they're being pitched, that they're this cog in the wheel where they're just supposed to be translating business goals into code, and that they're not going to be a part of actually solving the problems and defining what those goals are. And really what that means is that the people you're trying to hire, right, they want to be stakeholders in the long-term strategy. They don't want to feel like they have a management team that is just telling them, here's where we're going, here's your direction. They really want to feel involved in it, and you have to let them make decisions. So next slide, the learning aspect. So I mentioned earlier that they want to feel like they're a part of the process and that other people are going to learn from them. But the learning is kind of twofold. The first is, there's technology changing all the time for developers, and like new processes, new languages, all this different type of stuff. And I know that it's not always, feasible or even advisable within your products to be changing things like languages and platforms and stuff like that. But know that the people that you're working with, the people that you're trying to hire, they are interested in this stuff. They want to be learning new technologies. They're trying to build up their sort of portfolio of knowledge because it's transferable in the future, and it's kind of cool. I mean, it's fun to do. The world's changing fast, and they want to continue learning with it. It's not just trendy languages. It's that good really good developers, the people that you're trying to hire. When you talk about someone that your product's built on Python, and you're trying to hire someone and they're really good at Ruby on Rails, right? Like, we know that the person who's really good at Ruby on Rails is just a really good developer, and they'll be fine developing in Python for the most part. I know there are exceptions to the general rule. And when new things like Go comes out, a lot of people are going to want to learn how to do that. So it's not just that that they're going to be learning and dealing in your tech stack. They're also going to be involved in things outside of it, and they want to make sure that they have the ability to do that it's not going to be looked down upon as not part of their job, because it is. That's what they're doing. That's their personality. And it's not just about learning new languages and stuff like that, but it's also about learning from the team around them. And they like to know that there's someone on the team that's better at something than they are. This seems pretty obvious, but anyone who's run a development team before knows that basically people do become specialists in certain things. So if you have someone on your team who is a known specialist, or even if they're not known but they are a specialist in a certain area, it's really good to use that as part of your outreach to developers when you're trying to hire people, that you have someone in-house who is one of the best people you've ever met at a certain thing. That's fantastic, and you should be using that in how you're pitching your company, because the person that you're pitching to is going to want to learn that from them. Okay, so that's the first part of mine. I think we're going to do questions at the end, and I am going to hand it off here to Joe Humphreys.
Hello. Thank you, Will. Thanks very much. Hey, everybody. I'm Joe. And now that you've heard a bit about what developers want from an employer, I'm going to take it and I'm going to talk with you about how to take that information to get developers' attention, how to recruit them, and how to interview the developers who will best suit your specific company's needs. So we did that survey that Will talked about. That survey, again, we found that, I think a lot of employers feel that there's a shortage of developers out there, which can make it sort of daunting to think about building and growing an engineering team, especially your first couple of key engineering hires. However, our survey showed that 53.6% of developers are actively open to hearing about new jobs. So The candidate landscape is indeed competitive, but probably not as empty or as desolate as you might think. It's competitive because the ratio of developers to jobs is low, especially compared to other fields, which is why it's so important that you stand out among other companies who are hiring developers by giving developers exactly what they want in a job, or as close as you can come, at least. But before you can do that, you need to come up with what's important to you and to your company. What do you need in a developer? Do you need a developer who has familiarity engineering a product that's similar to your company's? Do you need someone with expertise in a particular tool or language or something that your company uses? Do you need somebody with a certain number of years of experience, or maybe somebody who's specific to your office location or to your team's location as opposed to somebody remote? These things, all of these things can limit your choices, and you might pass up some diamonds in the rough. The developer market is very competitive, like I mentioned, and the really top-notch people are going to be tough to find. So if you limit yourself to these common pitfalls, you could be passing up some terrific people. If you can evaluate developers based on their potential rather than solely their history, you might be surprised at what you find. Somebody with just 1 year of post-grad work experience, for example, who has engineered some amazing complex projects in their spare time, maybe something in school, they might run circles around a 10-year veteran in the engineering world. Somebody who has proven experience being a remote employee might have the output of 5 local developers and, frankly, might be less expensive depending on your location and the cost of living and labor in your location. So it's important to think outside these common constraints whenever possible. At Stack Exchange, we like to look for a lot of things, but we've limited ourselves to 6 main criteria, and I'm going to run through those with you today. The first one that's listed here is passion. Does their profile indicate a love for computers, for programming, and or just general like tech geekiness, you know? Did they start dabbling with computers at an early age? Do they have open source or meaningful coding projects that they work on in their spare time? Do they have a coding blog? As Will mentioned, we love to see public artifacts. It shows that not only is a candidate passionate about software development in general, but it shows that they're not shy about putting themselves out there for critique and collaboration, and that they want to be part of a two-way developer community. Most of these things that I just mentioned can be found on a developer's Careers 2.0 profile, but there are a variety of different places that you can find all of these artifacts. Second one listed is brains. Something that stands out. Of course, we all want to hire smart people. Developers tend to be pretty smart people, but we want, again, something that stands out if possible. Did they have a nice high grade point average? Did they participate in like the Math Olympiad or something while they were in school? Did they engineer something super complicated and intricate just for fun because they find that to be fun? These are all indicators that somebody has above average intelligence and would be somebody potentially good for you to hire onto your development team. The third one listed is English. Do they speak English? And that might at first glance sound discriminatory, but it's really not. It's crucial for employees, all employees, especially at early stage companies, to be able to communicate flawlessly with coworkers and with end users. And of course, this should be adapted to whatever is the primary language spoken by your company's employees and customers, but communication is key. Yes, they need to understand coding languages, but there also needs to be a good level of interpersonal communication, both spoken and written. Fourth on the list is customized, and by that I mean if the individual responded to a job ad that I placed, did they customize their application to Stack Exchange? Did they do their research and show enthusiasm for what we're doing as an organization, or did they simply insert our company's name into a generic cover letter template, or did they omit a cover letter altogether? We'd really much prefer to see that somebody went the extra mile and applied for a position with us because we're us, you know? They want to be part of what we're doing and not just get any old job to pay the bills. Fifth on the list here we have selectivity, and by that I mean did they look for things like did the candidate get accepted to like a tough competitive school or university? Did they graduate near the top of their class? Did they pass a notoriously hard interview battery and get a job at a renowned company? These and other things, but these all tell me that the candidate is a few things. First, that they're resilient, that they can endure something like that. It shows, of course, that they're smart, that they're crafty, but it also shows that they set really high personal goals and expectations for themselves and that they're able to achieve and exceed them. Those are the types of people that we want to see. And last on the list of things that we like to see in candidates at Stack Exchange is a little less tangible. We call it hardcore. For example, does the candidate show you that they know any complicated coding languages that are a little too tough for average developers to comprehend? Do they understand technical concepts beyond what's taught in school, and have they used those concepts to create something meaningful? If so, it's a very good indication that they can adapt to your tech environment, whether or not they have experience with it. And that leads back to a point that I made earlier. It's tempting to want to hire only people who have experience in C# if you are an organization that uses C#. If you can tell from this person's profile that they have experience picking up a language that's really difficult to understand and they did it from scratch and they did it quickly to build something meaningful, that's a very strong indicator that they'll be able to adapt to your environment with relative ease. So those are the things that we, as an organization, decided that we need in a developer. Not everybody checks all 6 of those boxes. It's very unusual that somebody does. We do ask for a lot. But if they meet at least 4 or 5 of those requirements, we'll take things to the next level with that candidate. We talked about assessing your needs and about steering away from insisting on all the usual suspects like years of professional experience and expertise in 1 or 2 particular coding languages, other pitfalls like that. And so once you have mapped out and once you're convinced of what you need in a developer, it's time for you to devise strategies for recruiting active candidates and passive candidates. Active candidates, of course, are people who are actively searching for a new job, and passive candidates are people who are also open to hearing about new jobs, but they might not be passing their resumes around and applying for jobs as actively. They might be waiting for people like you to discover them and to offer them the positions of their dreams, right? So let's talk first about attracting active candidates. Some of this topic will overlap with some of what Will talked about, but it'll be a good piggyback, a good springboard into actionable things that you can do to attract people by writing a good job ad. As he touched upon, a job advertisement and a job description are very different things. A job description is a list of tasks and demands and things that you need. And a job advertisement tailors it more to the person that you're trying to attract, right? So the most crucial thing when posting a job advertisement for the world to see is to avoid avoid advertising a list of tasks and demands. That reads like dry toast. You don't attract the best developers with dry toast. You've got to be excited about this stuff in order to find the people who will be as excited as you are. So in your job advertisement, explain the product that you're engineering. Explain the target audience. Explain the people who are going to be using this product and why it's useful. And explain how the candidate will contribute meaningfully, like Will said. Explain all of these things with enthusiasm, and you'll get the same level of enthusiasm in return. Do your best to show your company's personality and culture and the caliber of people that they'd work with. As Will told us, smart people want to work and collaborate with smart people. That's a given. I always find it to be a good sign when candidates tell me, I want to work with other talented people and I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. Not only is that a sign of humility, but it also shows that the candidate's enthusiastic about learning from his or her peers and sharing knowledge and being collaborative. These are all things that are terrific. And lastly, keep it short and sweet. Don't kill them with all the details that they'll find out once they get on a call with you. Put the pieces of information in there that the candidate will need in order to decide whether or not they want to apply for the job and learn more. A big, long, heavy job description can be a turnoff, but it can also be kind of a sign of how things are done at your organization. It might show that you're a bureaucratic organization or that you just have trouble getting to the point. I don't know. I just think that it's best to keep your job descriptions and your job advertisements short and sweet, and you'll attract the best people that way. Now a bit about passive candidates. Let's discuss those because they can be, as many of us already know, much more difficult to attract, but the reward can be much sweeter. Here are a few suggestions to sending messages to passive candidates. And for the sake of this conversation, these are messages that you'd be sending, such as emails. Well, we'll get into it. First, skip the intro, and I'll tell you why. If you're emailing somebody who's terrific, they probably get recruiting messages on a very regular basis, maybe on a daily basis. And you might be wasting valuable time by explaining who you are and what company you work for, especially because those things are usually in your email address, your name at yourcompany.com, right? So jump right into the meat and potatoes. Dear developer, I found your profile on Stack Overflow and was excited about the work that you've done, and then go from there. Next, tailor your message, of course. Tailor your message to the audience that, or to the person specifically whom you're trying to attract. If you send a templated email to a developer, you'll run the risk of losing credibility, and worse, you and your amazing company and your product won't stand out. Start your message, dear developer, it appears from your GitHub profile that you've worked on some complex and interesting projects, especially X, Y, and Z. People who think like you are the exact type of people who thrive at our company, and here's why. You got their attention then. Next, I recommend that you sprinkle some flattery into your messages, but don't unnerve them. Don't freak them out. You want to get your passive candidate's attention, but you don't want to scare them off by telling them that you know their dog's name and where they live and their personal cell phone number. Don't spread it on too thick, and don't over-flatter, but make sure the candidate knows that you did your homework and that you're interested in talking with them for the right reasons. Next, persist, but don't annoy. If the candidate doesn't respond to your first message, which, let's face it, that might happen, decide an appropriate amount of time before following up, and then follow up. Follow up once or twice, not later that day, not the next day, no matter how excited you are about the candidate. Follow-up emails should contain some original content. Don't just send the same email, of course. And it should be just as intriguing, or more so, really, than the first email that you sent to them. And chances are high that that second or third follow-up will be the one that will get their attention and will get a response. If after 3 follow-ups, this is really up to you and your situation. But after a certain number of time, you should probably throw in the towel. Otherwise, you're going to cross over from the pleasantly persistent category into the annoying category, and you'll ruin the chance possibly of connecting with that candidate in the future. Next, I have use discretion. I hope it goes without saying that you really shouldn't be trying to recruit developers on Twitter. I think a lot of, surprisingly, we discovered in our survey that a lot of developers have been reached out to by potential employers on Twitter, a very public forum where their boss might follow them and their coworkers might follow them, and it's just poor taste to try to do that. Try to be a little more behind the scenes and discreet, if at all possible. I also think the days are long over where you could just call a developer at their desk and try to recruit them that way. I mean, at Stack Exchange, our developers don't really have telephones at their desks anymore. And if you've managed to get their cell phone numbers and call them there, you're crossing over into that unnerving category, and you probably are not going to win them over that way either. And last but not least, be confident. This is probably the most important thing on the list. Don't apologize for messaging a candidate. It can be tempting, and I've done this too. It can be tempting to appeal to a passive candidate when you first message them by being overly disarming. I'm sorry you must get emails like this all the time, but I'm really hoping you'll want to talk to me because, no, be strong, be excited, and be enthusiastic. Don't scare people off with your enthusiasm, but you should never apologize for trying to help someone get the job of their dreams, right? So you've employed all of these tactics, and now you got a developer who wants to talk with you, who's excited about everything that you're doing. Now what? Here are some ideas. Use your whole tech team to evaluate candidates. An extra set of eyes, especially if you're a recruiter, you're on your HR team, and you're not an overly technical person, is going to be extremely worthwhile. Definitely consider having a developer review the profiles of passive candidates before you reach out, and active candidates, people who've applied for your jobs, before you respond to them. It'll save everyone time and effort in the end. We here at Stack Exchange have adopted a binary hire or no hire system, and all interviewers get veto power. If you're on the fence after an interview about if you're on the fence about a candidate after an interview, you should default to no hire. You shouldn't have to think too long and too hard about whether somebody's going to be a fit. If you do have to think that long and hard about that, then you haven't approached the interview the right way, and you should probably tweak your interview questions or your coding problems that you're going through with the candidates. Next, set clear expectations for interviewers. Everybody should understand the position and what they're assessing in each candidate. At Stack Exchange, we use a collaborative tracking system to make sure that no coding questions are repeated. Because again, you're not going to be providing the best candidate experience if you put them through 3 coding interviews, and the same coding question is asked of the candidate by each interviewer. A really good, solid, thorough interview process is going to be respected by developers. So making sure that all interviewers are adequately prepared before they go into the interview is absolutely crucial. And of course, be friendly and communicative with your candidates at all times, because interviewing is brutal. Who likes interviewing? Nobody likes to do this. You put all of your personal information out there, and then a group of strangers decides whether or not you're good enough to be hired by that company. That's daunting and that's terrifying, and they need somebody, a neutral party, a recruiter, HR, somebody just to kind of ease the pain of interviewing and to usher them through the process. I'd like to tell you a bit about our interview process at Stack Exchange, which, as you might guess, is somewhat thorough. The first step for inbound applications is for me to take a look at all of them and kind of evaluate them based on those 6 points that I discussed earlier. And if they meet the minimum criteria, then I send the application, the review, the portfolio, whatever I've got as part of the application over to a member of our development team for a technical review. If the resume reviewer gives the thumbs up based on those 6 criteria, then I schedule a phone interview between the candidate and myself, and this is to discuss the absolute basics. I want to talk with them about their background. I'd like to talk about our company and our team and how we do things. We got to get the salary requirement conversation out of the way, so it's best to start those talks now. And really just to set expectations, to establish who I am in the process and how I'm going to help usher them through the process, to explain the various steps of our technical interviews, and things along those lines, so that everything is clearly laid forth for them. From there, I scheduled the first coding interview, and the coding interview is done between the candidate and a member of our development team, typically a more senior member, and it can be completed in any language. The questions are designed so that the candidates can solve the coding problem in whatever language of their choice. It takes about 30 minutes. It's a relatively simple fizz-buzz type of problem, just to see how well they code. At this point, we've already evaluated their profile and whatever public artifacts that they have, so we know that they can write code. We just want to see if they do it at the same level as our team. If they pass that, the developer tells me that they passed, and then I schedule the second coding interview with the candidate. The second interview is slightly more complicated and takes a bit longer, about 60 minutes. If they pass that interview, then I schedule a third coding interview, which is even more complicated. Takes about 60 minutes for a total of 3 coding interviews with 3 different developers from our team. Provided all those go well, we move on to an interview with our VP of engineering. His name is David, and his interview is part coding and part culture fit. As much as I'm not a huge fan of the term culture fit, we need to know, will they work well with the team? Do they have the same values and beliefs, and do they work the same way? Do they have any special skills that we need, and which project or product is going to be best suited to their skills and their desires as a developer. From there, we schedule an interview with a product manager. I told you it's thorough. We schedule an interview with a product manager. Typically, that's Mr. Will Cole. And Will, like I said, is the product manager for careers. At this point, we're usually evaluating somebody to join our Careers 2.0 team. So he is assessing not only their technical ability, but their are they product minded? Are they engineering something, or are they engineering something with the end user in mind? Who is that end user? What do they want? What kind of thought needs to go into this, And by that time, we have thoroughly vetted people we vetted people so thoroughly, but we still put them in front of our CEO, Joel Spolsky, as a final step. At this point, it's rare that Joel will give this person a no hire because, like I said, we've really run them through the ringer by this point. It's more of an opportunity for Joel to sell the company and the position to the candidate and give the candidate the privilege to talk to Joel Spolsky, who is, a pretty renowned guy in the software development community. And by that time, the candidate is exhausted. This whole process can take a couple of weeks, depending on interviewers' availability and the candidate's availability. But usually it leads to an offer being extended, and everyone rejoices, and everybody is happy. I understand this approach might not work for everyone, especially if you're just getting your tech team off the ground. Maybe you don't have enough developers to put candidates through that thorough of an interview battery, but do your best. And within reason, the more different perspectives that you have, within reason, the better. So this concludes our presentation today, and at this time we'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So we have some questions queued up. I think the way this works is I'm going to repeat the question and answer some of them. So the first ones we're going to go through, let me queue these up, were related to the survey that I mentioned at the beginning and that Joe also talked about a little bit. So the first one from David was, how large was the survey? Was there any evidence of selection bias, past the obvious that we were polling people that use Stack Overflow? So the survey got right around 10,000 responses. I don't know exactly how many people we reached out to. It was in the tens of thousands, but right around 10,000 responses. Evidence of selection bias. So it's hard to say exactly because of we didn't collect a ton of data on them, but it was pretty representative. So I believe we had 93 countries involved and that were represented in the responses that we got. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me in terms of what could have possibly been selection bias was that we had around 10% of the people that responded were remote workers, people working from home. So that's obviously a little bit more than we know of the people that actually work remotely. So, but other than that, it was fairly representative. Obviously, you pointed out the biggest bias, David, which was they were all in some way a Stack Overflow user. So that also, I think, answered Victoria's question of how many devs answered the survey. So right around 10,000. So Earl asked, what were the demographics of the typical profile, person that answered, their age, their experience level, that sort of thing. So we did get some of this out of the survey. We outside of just age, that type of stuff, and the region part of it, like I said, we had around 93, I want to say 93, I'm saying 93, yes, it was 93 countries represented. A little bit over 2,000 of them came from the United States, and around, I think, 800 or so were from Europe, and the rest, obviously gets very spread out from there, but very representative there. In terms of years of programming and experience, around 15% of the respondents had 2 years of experience. Around 32 or 33% had between 2 and 5 years experience. Around 25% had between 6 and 10 years experience, and surprisingly, around 28% had 11 plus. And if you do the math and you check me, that probably doesn't add up to 100%. I was rounding a lot of the decimals there. Pretty spread out across the years of experience groupings as well. I think that answers all of the. Another question about the survey here was how important was the opportunity to learn and experiment on the survey, like fiddling with new technologies, Scala, Node. So we didn't ask specifically about that portion of it, but part of that was sort of put into the bucket at the very top, which became the number one response, which was the ability to grow and learn, right, in their role. It's not just like the ability to go from a web developer to the VP of engineering. It was actually phrased in a way that they would continue learning in their job. So that actually ended up being the number one thing that people were looking at, which is one of the reasons why we talked about it a lot. Okay.
I think a lot of these remaining questions were directed towards me, so I'll field a couple of them. Tatiana asks, could you please give some advice for companies hiring and training students on their first job? How to minimize the risk of losing them after their first year, and how to select a future star. So my advice would be, when first evaluating and deciding the people that you want, you, again, should find as much public information as possible. Do they have a blog, GitHub profile? Do they have code that you can evaluate and see if it's complex and were the projects that they built especially interesting, require a lot of thought and moving pieces. And more so for hiring junior people, maybe people right out of school, than anything, I would say to pair them up with more senior people on the team or have a rotation program or like a mentorship program. Because chances are these are people who have come from internships in the past where they were kind of side by side with other developers and were able to learn from them. So making sure that they're in good hands for their first year or so is going to be crucial for retention. Possibly even more importantly is giving them meaningful work to do. If you hire a junior person and you have them on bug duty for their entire first year, they're going to want to jump ship and actually ship code somewhere. So if you're thorough in your hiring process and you are able to select somebody whom you know that you can trust shipping code for your company, then I think that you'll find somebody you'll find some people who are going to stick around for the long haul. Some of our they're senior developers now, but we hired them right out of school and they're doing terrific, because we evaluated them well enough to know that they could be given the autonomy to do really meaty, meaningful work. Earl asked, short and sweet does not jive with candidates in high demand. They want relevant details up front to avoid wasting time talking to a lot of companies. I couldn't agree more. Short and sweet doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice important details. Short and sweet should mean that you don't include the unimportant details and you get right to the point. These are the things you'll be working on. These are the things you'll achieve. These are the things that we'll give to you. It's an advertisement. Just like any commercial you see on TV is supposed to be geared towards a certain demographic. All of the information that you learn today, build that into a job ad, and you should be able to get developers' attention. How important is college when hiring as opposed to initiatives, as in tough projects, contributions to open source? What about asking questions on Stack Overflow and answering them too? Clearly we're biased on the Stack Overflow piece. We love people who are active on Stack Overflow. As far as college goes, some of our top developers did not graduate from college. They skipped college and they began working immediately, and they're prodigies and they're terrific. We, of course, we like to see people who went to great schools and got great degrees, but it's not a deal breaker for us if somebody can show us, here's an app that I built from scratch by myself. I didn't like the way this was done before, so I built an alternative and it works a lot better. What they can show us that they've built is more important than the college that they went to, in our opinion.
I kind of want to expand on that just real fast on the college part. Is that okay?
Yep.
So another way to think about this is to think about selective processes, and you want to see candidates basically that have gone through some sort of selective process in their career, right? So college is just one of many things that could have been a selective process. So if they got into a top college or a really great engineering program, yeah, that's a really good signal. But if they didn't, and say they are a top user on Stack Overflow, or they have an open source project that was followed by or forked or used by hundreds or thousands of people, or they created their own startup that had some sort of traction, or they built a product that you really liked. These are also selective processes, right? And that it's not that we don't care about college at all. It's just that college is only one of those signals of what could be a selective process.
Right. Very true. Very, very true. Earl asked, how do companies know what salaries to offer to be competitive in hiring? I wish that there was one terrific end-all answer to that question, but sadly there is not. There's a variety of resources that you can use and a number of factors that come into play. Your location, for example. If your company or you're hiring people in a very high cost of living or a high cost of labor area, you're going to need to pay a little bit more. That's also a great argument for hiring remotely, because you could find some terrific people who are in an area where there aren't a lot of companies who are demanding people with their skills. And if you open yourself up to hiring remote people, you can find some terrific people, pay them a reasonable wage that is generous to them and reasonable for you, and everybody's happy. As far as resources go, you can purchase off-the-shelf compensation surveys. They're very expensive, but they're very thorough. There are online resources that you can go to. I wouldn't recommend trusting any one of them with all of your compensation data, but you've got salary.com, you've got Glassdoor. There's a site that I use called Numbeo, Numbeo, to help me understand the cost of living and the cost of labor in different geographies. A combination of all of those things are what I would recommend in order to know what salary to offer to be competitive or to be at market. Or maybe you're a company that is just getting off the ground and you have a ton of other things that you can offer, but you might not be able to be that competitive dollars-wise. Once you have that information, just being able to build a really compelling compensation package is the most important thing. The next question here is directed towards Will from Bjorn. Do you want to grab that one? Will?
Sure, yes. I'm scrolling through the order here. So
second to last one.
Bjorn asked, how does Stack Overflow hiring-wise stack up against LinkedIn and traditional sites like Monster, both in terms of matches and signed contracts as well as volume? So this is just asking basically how good is our product. There are a couple different ways to look at this. There are different products, right? So there are job boards, and then there are sourcing tools like messaging on LinkedIn and things like that, where you're getting directly in contact with developers. So from our perspective, our job board is not a traditional job board. One of the benefits of what we're doing is our jobs show up on Stack Overflow, which is where we have 20+ million developers going there. Every month, and that means that we're getting 500 million impressions for our jobs on that site. It's different from most job boards because most job boards are destination sites. They're places where active candidates need to actually go there to view the job. I know that there are some companies that do things a little bit differently. LinkedIn, for instance, will recommend you jobs through email. They'll even, if you're on the site in other places, try to get the jobs in front of you. So they're doing some of that as well. But it's not typical of your static job board that requires candidates to go there and apply. In terms of our search database, is traditionally, if you look at other competitors like LinkedIn or some of the other resume search things on Career Builder and Teller or Guild or something like that, ours seems much smaller. We have around 150,000 candidates inside of our sort of CV database, but the biggest difference for that is a pretty profound one, is that I as the product owner for this don't really care how many people are in there, and I don't think the recruiter should either. The reason I say that is not to play down the fact that we have fewer people, but because we could have many more. We could have everyone on Stack Overflow, millions of candidates in this database, but we don't, because the purpose of our messaging tool is that the database is full of people who have explicitly said they want to talk to a recruiter. So the response rates are huge for us. We don't want 10% response rates. We don't want 15 or 20% response rates, which are very typical of some of the other sites, where I'm not even saying, you could have success on those other sites, but we want a place where people want to hear from you. When you're getting 10% and 15% response rates, there's two things that happen. One is, why are the response rates low? They're low because there's a bunch of people in there who don't want to be contacted by recruiters, and two, because they're being contacted by recruiters, right, all of the time, that basically the pool has been tainted in a way, right? So many people are contacting these people because they're basically, sometimes they don't even realize they're on a recruitment tool or something like that, and we're really focused on making sure that the people represented in the database are there because they want to talk to recruiters. They want to talk to them. They're going to respond. So that's part of the way that we stack up there. Another question here that I think Joe and I could both answer was from Michael. It says, do you recommend a temp contract to hire before the full employment process? We've done both in the past. If you can, I've only had good results from this. If they can do a temp contract, obviously they're paid. You're not going to get the work for free. It's a really good way to feel out a developer or a designer or anyone that's going to be working on your product. It's a good way to see, for us, it was really helpful because we hire people remotely. And when we're hiring people remotely, that's a skill set that, it's great in a sense because we can hire anyone in the world no matter where they are. But it's also kind of a it's another requirement on the person that we're hiring. They have to be good working remotely. So working on these temp contract bases can help us sort of distinguish that, which is a hard thing to figure out in the traditional interview. Are they going to be good, remote? So I mean, in some cases it's not practical. If the person has a deadline or something like that, we definitely hire people that we like without doing a temporary contract. In fact, most of our hiring's done that way. But we have had situations where we've done it and it's been successful.
I'll piggyback that answer onto another question, which is how about some tips on finding some great designers? That is one thing that we did for every designer candidate, was give them a nice elaborate test to take. We gave them a bunch of time and a bunch of resources, and it was a real example of something that we would have them do here, like design one of our sites, and it was a huge tell for us whether or not somebody was going to be able to do the job. For finding great designers, I wish I had a better answer, because it took us a very long time to build out our design team, because we were looking for designers who are also pretty solid front-end coders. We found a really good batch of people, and one, if not two of them, came through Dribbble, Dribble. You can post jobs on Dribbble, and you can also browse their database. A whole lot of great designers on there. It's my top recommendation. So many questions, and we're out of time. Are we okay to keep answering questions, Yasmina?
Let's keep going.
Okay, let's keep going. Victoria says she's a recruiter and she works with a very similar interview panel, which is awesome. What happens when the CEO or VP rejects a candidate and you decide not to move forward? What preferred way do you have to handle bad news with a passive candidate? That's never easy. Easily the least favorite part of my job, but by this point, I think that hopefully the recruiter has built such a rapport with the person that delivering that news, although it's not going to be good news, is something that you can have a very frank conversation with them about. A lot of that has to do with, how constructive the final interview was with that feedback. If they just say, that person was a jerk, I don't want to work with that person, then it's going to be really tough to build that into something constructive that you can get back to the candidate. However, if they've made it all the way to the CEO or VP, you probably have something a little bit more tangible to work with. I think a personal telephone call goes a long way. Not an easy conversation to have, but after you've invested that much time in an interview process, sending an email, especially like a template thanks but no thanks email, I think is kind of insulting. And whether or not you want to hire somebody, it's really our motivation is to keep good ties with everybody, whether or not we want to hire them. So a personal phone call goes a very long way, letting them know specific areas that they went wrong. And if the person who hired them, even if it's the CEO or the VP, is willing to have a conversation themselves about specifics with the candidate, that would go an even longer way. More. Let's see. How long does the interview process take, and how long do you keep candidates warm? Our interview process moves forward continuously. There's very rarely a gap between interviews, but with 6 interviews in the process, it can take quite a long time. And I tell candidates up front in my very first conversation with them, if you make it through all these steps, which I hope that you do, this could take up to a couple of weeks depending on people's availability. Are you still going to be available? Do you have other positions that you're interviewing for? I don't want to ask too many details, but I really want them to know that for their sake, I need to know this information so I can set clear expectations with them. It's unusual that we have people drop out of the running, especially because they get more and more excited about the position as the interviews progress. That's how we do it.
There's one more thing I would add to that, is that some of this is just going to be a function of how large your company is. Right. So if you're working in a larger company, it's going to be harder to move fast. We all know this. And as we've grown, we've seen that happen. The important thing with the interview process here is that we don't waste people's time. Everyone has the chance to say no, and if someone says no, we don't continue them down. So it can be very short if you know the answer is going to be no from the first recruiter, from the first interview on. I know that when we were smaller, we were able to move a little bit quicker. And if you have that ability, that's great. Don't think that you have to take 2 or 3 weeks, or that's any type of reflection on your seriousness or your ability to be thorough. It's just kind of where we are.
Right. Well, I see a question directed at you from Luma about the coding tests and how we assess it. That's really actually something that's handled more by our developers themselves, but I think Will would probably do a better job of explaining
I know a little bit about this.
The content.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not typically ever running the coding test because I would be a bad judge of of the answers. But I know basically how they're usually algorithmy type questions, and they scale in difficulty as we get further along. We try to be agnostic. Like we're usually doing these coding tests remotely, so over Google Hangout. Sometimes we'll be in person. We'll get a whiteboard. But if someone needs an IDE, we'll just let them use an IDE of their choice. Or if they want to be collaborative and they don't have one available at the time, we'll even just write the code in, say, a Google Doc, very similar to having a whiteboard. And like I said, we've kind of broken down 5 or 6 different levels of questions and a couple questions within each level. And as far as assessing them goes, it's the developer. The developer themselves needs to assess it. What they're looking for is not just getting the answer right, because as they get harder, it can be hard, especially, again, this is one of those things where you have to kind of understand the personality of a developer, right? Sometimes you will be dealing with developers that are more introverted. They're not good in interview processes, and asking them to perform in front of you, a coding problem, that is like a nightmare for the introvert, right? It is not fun. So our developers are usually, very patient with them, right? And if they, trip up or something like that, they'll see how they respond to feedback, right? So, this is going to happen in your everyday job. You're going to write something that's not going to be right. If they trip up a little bit and we give them a hint, we kind of, we know which problems and where people are going to trip up usually because we've done it so many times, and we know kind of how to push them in the right direction, how they respond to it. Ultimately, we want to get to the answer, and if they can't in a given amount of time, that's usually a bad sign. We'll give them feedback while they're doing it. We'll try to tip them off where they need to be tipped off and see how they respond to it. And if they do it super fast, sometimes we'll switch it around and ask them to solve a different problem. And I can say, oh, but I just found out that we have a new requirement, and see how they adjust to that. That's usually how we're doing it. I wish I could tell you exactly what the coding problems are, but I don't usually run them.
We have a bank of coding problems for that first round, second round, and third round, and each interviewer has kind of like their go-to question. I just go in a rotation of interviewers when it's time to assign interviewers. And each of them has their top couple of questions that they know they're really good at administering and really good at assessing the results of. So, so that's how.
But I will point out for everyone listening here real fast is that if you're hiring a developer, and this has come up before when we've talked about this stuff, some people have asked, do we even need to have a coding question? And it's so important, I can't even state how important it is. If you're hiring a developer and you don't have coding questions as part of your interview process right now, you really, really, really need to. It's very important.
I think that is the answer to a couple more of these questions that we haven't yet answered. For example, Jeff
really?
W. would like to know, are references useful or important? And they can be. They really can be. But for developers, if you're going through a solid couple coding questions, you're going to have the information that you need about that person. Now, there are situations where a reference might be a good idea. Maybe somebody seems really great for, as far as their abilities are concerned, but they've had a couple jobs every year. Why is that? You want to talk to one of their previous employers to see if they're a trouble employee for some reasons that don't relate back to their to what they can offer from a technical perspective. Be careful with references, though, because candidates are only going to give you the names and numbers of people who will give them good references. So don't put all your eggs in the reference basket. They can be helpful. I'll tell you that we don't do them here, and we haven't had any problems yet. But you all just heard how in depth our interview process is. So I think that we've found a good way. Will, the next question is for you. You want to snag that one?
I have one from Robert here saying, is the absence of public artifacts a warning flag? It seems a lot of older and more experienced developers are not as comfortable putting their personal details on the public internet. Does this disqualify them? Short answer is no, this does not disqualify them. There's other reasons why they might not have public artifacts. They could be working as a government contractor or in a company that doesn't allow them to use open source. Or, sometimes we even heard companies saying, like, we don't want you, answering or asking questions on Stack Overflow for, some reason or another, which seems completely silly to me. And I know their developers go behind their backs and do it anyway. But it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily disqualify them. Now, of course, when we're trying to hire for our Q&A team, it's definitely a very good thing if they've been active in the community. So we have a vested interest in like seeing public artifacts, especially on Stack Overflow there. It's just another signal, right? A lot of if like with anything, there are way more people consuming things like answers on Stack Overflow or open source projects than there are contributing to it. It can be a signal that someone's popular or really good because you can see their work up front, but it doesn't necessarily disqualify them. All shapes and sizes. Hope that answers it.
Somewhat similarly, we've been asked how important a developer's public speaking profile is, like if they've conducted workshops on technology X, whatever. It's not a deal breaker if they don't have a lengthy public speaking profile. It is nice to see, especially if this is a person who can then, if we hire them, begin speaking as a representative of Stack Overflow. It's nice to have that that person as an advocate for us, a good public speaker. But it's not a deal breaker. It's nice, but plenty of the people that we hire do not have public speaking profiles.
And I would also say there that it is obviously not a deal breaker for us, like Joe said, but those people are valuable, right? When we mentioned before that people want to work with, like, your team is part of your marketing. Your team is how you can help attract other people. When you do have some public people, it doesn't have to be your whole team by any means. That's a good thing. They are helping sell your company. They're helping your recruiting process. So again, not necessary by any means, but it's definitely can be a plus. It can also be a signal, for us, and I know this is very, is only going to apply to a few of you, of could be a sign of developers that would be good working remotely, just that they're strong communicators, that they're not going to be, in the office with you, that they're going to keep up and be communicative that way.
Very true. Joshua asked if we ever use psychometrics, and I like that question. It's an interesting question. For the development hiring that we do not use psychometrics. Again, we put them through such a thorough technical battery that we don't really use off-the-shelf tests to determine whether they're different aptitudes and personality traits. For our sales team, however, we do, and it's turned out to be kind of a good predictor of performance. I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with pre-employment assessments of that nature because I think that most employers use them incorrectly, but for us they've worked out quite well and we use them correctly. So, but that's a big question. It depends on the type of person you're looking for. It depends on the the skill set that they need to have, who they'd be working with, and the tests that you would be interested in administering. There was another similar question about recruitment metrics, like cost per hire and things like that. On my list, but currently we don't have metrics like that in place. I mean, we could pull some easy metrics like time to fill, how long between when somebody applies versus when they get a job, how long the interview process takes, but nothing like that I'm super excited to report back right now as far as recruitment metrics that we have in place.
I saw a question from Deb asking, what has been the average time to fill a developer job in the U.S.? It's taking me about 60 to 90 days, and it would be good info, especially for the management there. I don't know our exact number, mostly because we're constantly hiring, which means I don't know if when that person came through the funnel.
Right.
So we're interviewing people all the time for basically the same positions, general full stack web developers or sysadmins, and those jobs are just always up and running. I do have some experience though, with our clients that use our site. Not trying to dodge the question at all, but there's so many things that factor into how long it's going to take. If you're Google, it doesn't take as long. Everyone knows who you are, and it's great. And as soon as you post something, you're going to get 1,000 applications. More typically, you're going to post something for 30 days, and you're going to get 10 responses for the non-Googles of the world. And whether or not those are quality, it'll depend. A lot of it, has to do with how you're marketing your company, how much effort you're putting into it. 60 to 90 days seems a little bit on the long end, to be honest. We've gone through that before. We've gone through, especially on the designer part of taking at least that long. We even tried to hire a data scientist one time, and that just ended up never happening because we stuck at it for 90 days and it never happened. So we've been there before, but for a general full stack web developer, which I feel like is the most common type of position, 90 days would definitely be long there for a single developer to hire.
It's once you.
I would say closer to 30 to 60.
Once you get a well-oiled machine down as far as your interview process concerned, 30 to 60 is definitely within reason. I do believe, and I don't have the data in front of me, that results from our survey, most recent survey, said that it takes our clients on average 60 to 90 days. So you're not you're kind of close to the rest of the competition. But I think that with a little TLC, that could probably be reduced to more like 30 to 60 days. Where are we? Do you try to approach the candidate even if he rejected your offer to review a job? If so, then how? I think that means if I messaged a candidate and the person said, no, I don't want to review that job, I don't want to be considered for that position. If I'm understanding the question correctly, that depends on a couple different things. It depends on how adamantly they said no, please leave me alone. And it depends on how badly we want that person. If they are just, if they walk on water and I really need to have that person, then I'm going to respond to their rejection to my message with something along the lines of, I respect that, now's not a good time. If there ever is a better time, this is how you reach me. Would it be okay if I followed up with you in a certain amount of reasonable amount of time? I mean, that's the best that you can do when you get the door slammed in your face. And then I would do it, and then I would follow right up with them, see if anything has changed. The recruiting can be a quick, hi, nice to meet you. You should come in for an interview for a position. Or, you can just plant the seed, start a relationship with somebody, know full well that they're not looking for a job and maybe not interested in changing jobs at the time. But when the time is right, you're going to be on the forefront of their mind because you've built this non-threatening, non-aggressive relationship with them. That's what's going to be the big differentiator there.
There's a question here from Earl asking, what is your turnover rate for developers? All right, two-part answer here. First, our personal experience. I've been here for 2 years at Stack Overflow. We have over 25 developers working here.
27.
27. Yeah, sorry.
27.
I forgot the mobile team. Yes.
Yes.
Our turnover rate. We've seen in my 2 years here, 2 of them leave voluntarily. They were both to go work on their own startups. So we basically, very, very low turnover rate. Now, there's things though that when we talk to our clients about this a lot. I mean, a lot of what Joe and I just talked to you about, and especially on the what developers want section, what I was talking about in terms of environment and things like that. I mean, those are the things that you can do to help sort of squash the turnover rate, right? When developers are in an environment they like, when they feel like they are stakeholders in the product that they're building, they're much less likely to leave. If they're being told what to do and they have no stake in it, then of course, I mean, if something comes up where they are going to be a part of that process, it's going to seem pretty attractive to them. And the other thing is that, realize that, at least for now, the world that we live in today, the developers are the ones in demand, and we're the ones trying to keep them around and get them in the first place. And that we have to be conscious of these environments that they want to work in. They're demanding it because they can get it, and they can get it in other places. So our turnover rate is low right now because we put a lot of effort, from the CEO down. One of the primary things we're doing is we're trying to build the best environment for a developer to live in, or to work in. So hope that helps.
Yes. Andy has asked, do we look at existing code that they've written before? They may have code on GitHub, but do you assess the quality of that code? That happens in the resume review, the application review process. So for inbound applicants, if somebody submits an application, I see that they do have open source. I see that they check a lot of the boxes that we look for. From there, I fully admit that I'm not the right person to assess the quality of their code, so that's why I send their resume and their application and their profile over to a member of our development team so that person can assess the quality of the code. And 9 times out of 10 they do. That one other time out of 10, it's because they've got so many other awesome things in their profile that we want to talk to them anyway. So we always look at the quality of their code for sure.
And it's almost always like an assessment in terms of like, if we like it. If there's something there that we don't particularly like because, we think the quality is down, like if they're attractive in other ways, like we're not going to necessarily use that against them. It usually doesn't disqualify someone to like put something out there and then have us judge it before we even talk to them. If we like them anyway, it's usually something that only enhances how much we like them.
Right, very true. Yaroslav has asked, frequently developers attempt to deceive at the interview stage by stressing that they're passionate, ready, and willing to work, and then it all goes downhill after that. How can this be eliminated? Make them code in the interviews. Evaluate them as an entire package, not just the Q&A in the traditional interview setting. If they stress that they're passionate, ready, and willing to work, that proof will be in what they have put out in the past. That's most simply that I can answer that. If you see somebody who does have evidence that they're smart and that they get things done and that they have had strong output in the past, and then it goes downhill after that, there might be other factors coming into play for you to think about at your company, about the relationship with the person that you hired along with the rest of the company and the rest of the team. And there just might be other factors that you'll need to take a look at.
Cool. I think the last question I see here is from Yala that was asking basically to expand a little bit on how we're hiring remote developers and beyond doing like a temp contract. Did we already answer that, Joe? I don't think we did.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah. So the additional things we do. So yeah, remote is part of how we work, and so there are a couple things that we do. First of all, we'll do part of the hiring process remotely, like through a Hangout or through Skype or something like that. Obviously, if they're going to be working remotely, we need to interact with them remotely beforehand. And we have hired remote people without doing the project before. That means we still might have them into the office at some point to interview with our CEO or with our VP of engineering, but they're going to be doing the things in the interview remotely because that's how we're going to work with them. So that means I do the product side questions with them remotely. Just seeing if they show up on time, if they're available, right? Seeing if they have a quiet place to do, at least asking them. Sometimes they'll be doing the interview from work or, on their break or something like that. But, talking to them about if they have a quiet place to work. That's going to be important if they're working remotely. Doing coding questions remotely. Talking to other developers remotely. If you make it part of your interview process, then it's going to give you a good sign of whether or not you can work with this person remotely.
I think we got them all.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions.
Awesome. Wait, how fast does the recruitment process need to be? How many steps do you think it's important to cover to make sure a good recruitment process? The ones that I listed on our process, I think is just enough. I don't think that you need to go through too many more than that. You might not have a big enough development team to put people through 3 coding interviews and then a VP and then a product manager and then the CEO, but do as much as you can. Get as many, as big of a variety of viewpoints as you can within reason. Don't have everybody in the company interview somebody. That would be overkill. And how fast the recruitment process needs to be depends on your need as an organization and how sought after the person is whom you want to hire. If somebody's got 3 offers on the table and you want them, it's going to show them that you're passionate about hiring them if you pull out all the stops and move as quickly as you possibly can.
But whatever you do, don't skip the coding interview. Don't cut that out. That has to be there.
All right, good. All right.
All right. I think we've gotten through all the questions here. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Great
questions. It was fun.
Everyone.
Thanks for all the questions.
So
All right. Thank you so much, Will and Joe, for presenting an outstanding webcast for us all today and for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. Folks, we'd also like to say a big thank you to our audience that attended our webcast today, and we thank you for giving us your time, and also thank you for sending in your questions, because having your questions really adds so much to these events, so thank you for those. And finally, as we close out, we would like to say a very big thank you to Stack Overflow today for sponsoring our webcast, and we'd like to let you know Stack Overflow is the world's largest website for professional programmers. Stack Overflow is a Q&A site that serves as programmers' go-to resource when they need to troubleshoot a coding issue. With more than 25 million developers visiting the site on a monthly basis, Stack Overflow represents the largest community of programmers on the Internet. Thank you again, Stack Overflow. Folks, this will conclude today's webcast. Goodbye, everybody.